Welcome to the Headley Highlight Show's Headley Headspaces. And this headspace is called There Are No Plans to Send Troops to Gaza, as confirmed by Yvette Cooper.
Has there been any discussion of European or British troops, military, involved in this ceasefire plan?
That's not our plan. There's no plans to do that, but...
And there's always a but. As reported by Gravitas News yesterday,
where British troops have joined a US-led multinational task force to oversee the fragile ceasefire in Gaza.
So before I jump into my headspace, which is called There Are No Plans to Send Troops to Israel, is there, Yvette Cooper? And then I played her saying no, and then I played you the headline saying it is. Let me just jump all over the preamble. Do make a contribution. I'm partial to 3 wings and chips and a Miranda. Do sign up at deniseheadley.com on my YouTube and also on my website. I plan to get to 2,200 subscribers, but only with your assistance. Oh yes, and don't forget to jump all over my live show every week, 8 p.m. on X, every Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So now that we've done that preamble, let's jump straight all over this. So about a week ago, Yvette Cooper appeared on television after that charade of an exercise masquerading as a ceasefire, the one that was brokered by Trump. And then you had everyone standing in lines in Egypt, shaking each other's hands and performing acts of encouragement amongst themselves, patting, smiling, posing for the cameras as usual. It's all seemed to have broken down. How unsurprising. Frankly, I thought that looked like a pantomime, as opposed to a ceasefire, which is not actually an end of hostilities for the people of Gaza, of course. So in that period, if you weren't really familiar what happened, all of these world leaders coalesced around each other. They then said the war is over, and we saw jubilant pictures of people in Palestine eating bread. Very manufactured, in my opinion. And at that time, Yvette Cooper was being asked, and she is the Shadow Home Secretary. She said, look, we're not sending any troops. Because the British way of dealing with things, they're so underhand and involved in so many of these conflicts. You have no idea the level of chaos MI6 and the British Army and its agents actually create all around the world. But essentially now, they're officially being recognised as being in Israel, even though they've been there, as from my understanding, for several years, practically even 2-3 years, under the control of Israeli military. But of course for our local consumption in a management capacity, not as troops on the floor or providing reconnaissance, so that they can just basically erase the Palestinians from the face of the earth. So Miss Cooper was asked the question, are we sending troops? And of course, she said no, in her usual mealy-mouthed fashion. Let's listen, shall we?
Has there been any discussion of European or British troops, military, involved in this ceasefire plan?
That's not our plan. There's no plans to do that, but...
So did you hear what she said? That's not our plan. There are no plans to do that, but... And then she went into a lengthy explanation about the coalition allies who were involved in this public exercise being involved. But then yesterday, as I was looking for details about, what we're doing for the show, I come across Gravitas News. And what does Gravitas News tell me? That British troops have been deployed in a peacekeeping capacity to support the fragile peace. And even the language is ridiculous. The fragile peace makes it seem as if Hamas and the Israeli military are equally militarized and supported, when in fact that's not the case. Anyway, let's hear what Gravitas News has to say.
Let's now shift our focus to West Asia, where British troops have joined a US-led multinational task force to oversee the fragile ceasefire in Gaza.
So that language alone is very contrived. But also what's interesting to me, that this is Gravitas News, which is an Indian news channel. I haven't seen this on any of the corporate or legacy media channels in this country. And don't you think it should be something we would be talking significantly about, because now we are entering into an active conflict? And the reason this is an active conflict is because Israel, as the aggressor in this war, it's not even a war, in this obliteration of the Palestinian people, are now drawing in troops from all other countries so that they can effectively carve up the country with the support of allies. But it's masquerading as a peace exercise. And that's for our consumption on our news and legacy and corporate media channels. And what's interesting is this English-speaking news channel is saying to you as the listener, this is part of a coalition peace force. So as far as I'm concerned, they're peddling the corporate media narrative about this war. So it's not everywhere you go you're going to hear the reality of a situation. It's still going to be the narrative. And what is a narrative? A narrative is a story, and that story is still peddled. So what's also concerning for me about the deployment of British troops into an active war zone is there are so many similarities with previous conflicts which are effectively being rebaked with what Mr. Keir Starmer and his administration is currently doing in supporting the genocide and erasure of the Palestinian people. We should not be having any troops over there. We should have no deployments, peacekeeping or otherwise. And we don't have sufficient enough people even asking those questions as to why we are more and more involved in this erasure of an entire people. So not only do you get Yvette Cooper saying, when she answers the question, are you going to put troops on deployment?
That's not our plan. There's no plans to do that, but...
That but is always very important, because that but allows our government to operate a contradiction in plain sight. And that contradiction is a violation of human rights, complicity in the genocide of an entire community, as well as political and media cover for it. Mr. Starmer places himself as a moral corrective in the sense that he is the person, that's how he wants the public to perceive him, but yet he is overseeing these violations. The deployment of troops, in my opinion, especially when you use the language logistics and coordination, is vague. And that vagueness helps to hide the brutality of their engagement there. Just think about Iraq and Afghanistan and the language that was used to describe involvement of our own troops and our own military in those exercises, and how easily they could move from being there for logistics and coordination activities to active duty. So the switch is really, really quick. In addition, I think this whole deployment of the troops kind of mirrors the way Tony Blair dealt with the Iraq war. You know, he and Keir Starmer, in my opinion, he's trying to adopt that same type of presentation. Everything's done for humanitarian reasons, but that sounds reasonable. But the reality is it's not for humanitarian reasons. It's for future escalation. And the problem with this whole question about them denying it and then saying it was there, it's been proven that the UK has been helping Israel with RAF reconnaissance activities. I think they've conducted 500 surveillance flights over Gaza from the base in Cyprus. They've been doing that since 2023. So they're actively involved in this conflict. Our own military assets are actively involved in them. Those are the ones that are owned by hedge funds, invariably though, because most of our military assets now are owned by hedge funds. And then the RAF and our military, we rent them. That's how bad we are in this country. That's where we've got to in this place, in this country. And what makes it even worse is that you then get sucked into these spaces where our government is in basically being very complicit, and that's exactly what is happening. So when all this, for argument's sake, when all of these surveillances were taking place, okay, the World Central Kitchen aid workers, they were bombed. And they killed 3 British nationals, and the RAF won't release the information. And you have to ask yourself, who does our military assets serve, us or a foreign power? And I think it's the latter. And we still continue to send and support with arms licenses despite the ICJ's genocide ruling. And so to me, the suggestion of a peacekeeping force and us being part of a stabilisation exercise is a sham. It's just for our own local consumption so that people here don't really see that we are actively involved in the erasure of the Palestinians by virtue of our own military assets being deployed there and also our own military assets assisting the Israeli government in crushing the Palestinian people. Some of the contradictions as well about this whole thing, apart from the fact that they told you, look here, we're not doing anything and then we're sending people here under this guise, is that I don't think there's been any kind of parliamentary scrutiny of soldiers being sent in a peacekeeping mandate or in any other mandate. I mean, when has Parliament had a view about that? You know, aren't we actively going into a war zone? Shouldn't our MPs be talking about that? Or have they been so captured that they are not even allowed to speak about anything? It sounds so much like the Iraq war. You know, Parliament didn't have enough time to debate these things. They were presented with some dossier and told that the world is going to end based on, you know, Satan's left hand, which is Mr. Blair. And then look what happened. 1 million Iraqis dead, and suddenly him and his son are billionaires along with Larry Ellison and trying to change the face of public services by ensconcing themselves into them. Yes, people, if you didn't know that, the Tony Blair Institute will soon be bringing you education, health and transport planning. Check it out, darling. They signed a memorandum of understanding with the British government. So for me, this whole troop deployment says that it demonstrates our continued subservient position to the US, because now we heard our Home Secretary only 10 days ago saying we're not sending troops, and then 10 days later we are sending troops. It also, in my opinion, exposes our own country to any legal challenges because we're effectively in a foreign country and we are part of the oppressing group. Doesn't matter if you call them peacekeepers. You're in someone else's land, yeah? You're not supposed to be there. The whole thing reeks of hypocrisy, in my opinion, especially as we have the human rights champion as the head of the country, Mr. Keir Starmer. And I think it will mean that at some point there has to be some kind of reckoning. And that reckoning is going to come, but it will come way after Yvette Cooper is no longer in office, because that's the nature of these things. You do them and then you drag them out and hope people forget. That's the British way. So at the beginning of my headspace, I said, did you know that we were sending troops? Yvette Cooper said no, and basically we are. And what this tells me is that you can't really trust what the government is saying from one news cycle to the next, because it's always changing. Like I said, the narrative is a story. The only thing that changes in the narrative, it remains the same. You just change the coating on the outside so people think something different's happening. And that's essentially what's happening here. It's no different. We've been supporting Israel for the last 50, 60 years with political cover, with, you know, complicity, supporting the country, investing in the country. And we can't seem to extricate ourselves away because our country, in my opinion, has been captured by the Zionists. All our institutions have been captured by Zionist influences and the Zionist ideology. And as a consequence of that, we're kind of stuck. So I don't know about you, what your thoughts are, but when I hear MPs say we're not doing something, I absolutely know they mean we are doing something.
Has there been any discussion of European or British troops, military, involved in this ceasefire plan?
That's not our plan. There's no plans to do that, but
10 days later.
Shift our focus to West Asia, where British troops have joined a US-led multinational task force to oversee the fragile ceasefire in Gaza.
See you next week. Don't forget to make a donation because I'm very partial to free wings and chips and a Miranda or a bit of Bitcoin. And cut!